Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining our first event that Boston IVF is hosting for the week of National Infertility Awareness Week. My name is Stephanie Rodrigues. I am one of the social workers here in the Wellness Center at Boston IVF. I am a licensed social worker, an LICSW, in the state of Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire. I've been a licensed social worker since 2014. I've worked in a variety of settings, including fertility clinics, surrogacy agencies, hospital settings. I've done community work, but here now in my role as a social worker at Boston IVF, I work specifically with patients for either individual therapy or couples counseling. And I also do monthly support groups that are co-facilitated by myself and my colleague, Dylan Everett. These are support groups that are open to Boston IVF patients. And if there is ever any interest in learning more about what our 2025 schedule looks like, you can always find it on the Boston IVF website. Also within our role here, I do psychoeducational consultation for third-party patients. So that means anyone that is using donor sperm, donor eggs, or donor embryos to grow their family. Today, we're going to be talking about stress and fertility, and then we'll be opening it up for some questions. Just to sort of preface, again, as a social worker, I am not a medical professional. And so any medical questions that you may have should be directed to your nursing team and your doctor of record. But once we get started with the Q&A section, of course, you are welcome to put in any question that you're thinking of. If it is a question that I can answer, I will. And if it is a question that I can't answer, I won't, and I can sort of let you know who to best direct that question to. So to start on our topic, stress and fertility. Fertility treatments are inherently stressful. There are a lot of factors at play, including attending medical appointments, medications, managing hormones, changes to your body, changes to your mood, changes to your relationship with your partner, or maybe changes in your relationships with your friends or family, the feeling of pressure, financial stresses, taking time off of work, and of course, the big question that many people ask is this going to work? And so fertility treatments, for that reason, always bring a certain level of stress to the process. That is normal, and that is really, really common. Something that's important to know is that stress is not an emotion. It is not the same experience like when we are feeling sad or happy or excited. Stress is a physical response. It's a physical reaction. It is an automatic response of our nervous system when it perceives danger or a threat. When we perceive danger or when we perceive something as threatening, this triggers that fight or flight response. And so then your body begins to produce adrenaline, cortisol, and norepinephrine. And that's sometimes when you start to feel your heart rate increasing, your senses getting heightened, and maybe your breath getting a little more shallow. Your brain thinks that maybe you can do something to protect yourself, which is why it triggers these responses to prepare you for either that fight or flight response. Your brain can't tell the difference between fear of a negative pregnancy test or an unsuccessful transfer versus the fear of being attacked by a predator, like a bear or a tiger. And so that's why it's important to learn ways of managing stress. While stress alone doesn't cause infertility, it is a factor that impacts overall well-being, and it may impact the ability to conceive. Again, which is why it's really important to find ways to help manage your stress while you're going through treatment. The goal of stress management is to minimize stress, but not to completely eliminate it. Because again, stress is sort of inherently part of fertility treatment. And I think sometimes it can sort of set yourself up if the goal is to never feel stress at all. And so really, I like to think of managing stress with the goal of lessening it or minimizing it or just managing it better when it inevitably arises. The first part of stress management is to recognize stress and recognizing stress as that physical response. So recognizing when your breathing is not controlled or when your heart rate is increasing, or maybe other signs of stress include the inability to sit still or to focus. These are physical signs that most people experience when they are stressed. One of the best ways to help manage stress and those physical responses is finding ways to make your body safe and to feel safe. Something that can be really helpful is journaling. So that includes writing down what physical signs you're experiencing. Shallow breathing, the increased heart rate, potentially shakiness, potentially brain fog, inability to focus. It can be really helpful to build sort of that recognition of those physical signs. So writing it down and rereading it is also really helpful. Get into your body. So what that means is sort of getting more attuned and aligned with what your body is experiencing. It can be really helpful to go through your 5 senses. What can you see? What can you hear? What can you smell? And what can you taste? What can you touch? All of those things, engaging those 5 senses, can help make your body feel safe. Another stress management technique is controlling your breathing. Deep, slow, and measured breaths can help with some of those physical symptoms of stress. A really common breathing technique is breathing in through your nose for 4 seconds, holding for 7, and breathing out through your nose for 8. And you can repeat that as many times as you need until you recognize that your breathing has slowed down and become more controlled. Other ways to help manage stress can be moving your body. Things like practicing yoga or brisk walks or dancing. That can help manage also some of these physical signs of stress. There is a really well-known book with the sort of lesson that the body keeps the score. And the thought of that is that trauma lives within the body and is stored within the body. Doing some of these movements can help release some of that trauma that has been stored. Something else that can be really helpful is to make time to go outside, to feel the sun on your face or to feel the wind. It again is a really good way to remind your brain that you are safe. There are, of course, so many other ways to also manage stress. And oftentimes what I tell my patients is that it's just about finding your flavor of support. And so maybe some of these 5 things that we just reviewed might be part of your repertoire of stress management, but that's not all that exists. Other things that can be really helpful include acupuncture, which is something that's also available at the Wellness Center, making time for recreation and fun. It is really important to make time for things that still feel really fun and bring you joy. It can be either for yourself or as a couple. It can be either for yourself or for your friend group and your family. Finding something to do that is outside of what is demanded of you while in treatment. Support groups can be a really incredible way to build community and connect with other people. Oftentimes, what I hear from a lot of patients is the feeling of isolation through this process, or feeling like it's really hard to find someone that you can have an honest conversation about when it comes to IVF and how challenging it is and managing all of the ups and downs. Finding a good support group where you feel connected and heard and seen by other people who have also been in this experience or are going through it with you can definitely make you feel less alone and part of a community. Individual or couples counseling is also really important and something that I am, of course, a strong advocate for. I think it's just really helpful to have some dedicated time and space to cognitively process some of the experience that has either led you to IVF or while in treatment or even thereafter. Again, the goal of stress management is to minimize and not eliminate stress completely, only because I don't know if that is really a realistic goal. But to minimize it and lessen it is certainly doable. And you need to just find what fits your needs the best. It is definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach. Some questions that I can answer that we received ahead of time that I'll start with. I'll go through some of these questions, but then I'm going to sort of open the floor to the rest of you. One of the questions I received is, how do I better cope with the ups and downs of treatment? To start, I think you create your own personalized menu of coping strategies that resonate with you, that you enjoy engaging with. I think having something kind of pre-written and reminding you of the different things that you can do can be really helpful, especially in a moment of stress where it might be hard to think of these things on your own. And so on your menu, you can have things like calling a trusted friend or joining a support group or reaching out to someone within a support group that you've made a connection with, going for a walk, yoga, listening to music, taking yourself out to dinner, journaling, planning a night out, or, scheduling a session with your therapist. Those can also be great things to put on your menu to choose from when you're feeling like you're dealing with a really big up or a really big down. Another question I received is, how can I communicate with my partner when we're both dealing with infertility differently? This is a really common question and something that comes up often because the stress of infertility and fertility treatments can really impact any relationship. First, I think it's really helpful to understand each other's communication styles. Do you need time to process before you can have a conversation? Does your partner need time to process before they can engage in a productive conversation? Those are things to sort of figure out ahead of time. understanding that your experiences in this are going to feel different also. And that's because your roles are different. One of you is the patient and the other is not, but you are working towards the same goal, but you have different roles. And so allowing for the other person to kind of verbally process and explain what their experience feels like for both of them, I think can help create a lot of understanding. Something else that I hear really often is just the kind of inequity that sometimes patients feel that their partners don't, right? As the patient, you're going to appointments. As the patient, you're dealing with insurance and the pharmacy, and you're giving yourself injections. And as the partner, those are things that they can't do. But that's not to say that maybe there are other things that your partner can do to sort of offset the workload. And so oftentimes I suggest to couples to create a to-do list that you can both tackle. There, are things that your partner won't be able to do, but there's still a lot of things in your life that you need to get done. So whether that's tackling other household or life tasks like grocery shopping, cleaning, paying bills, getting the oil changes for your cars done, this is kind of a long running to-do list that patients and partners can create together and sort of divvying up the tasks so that it feels a little less burdensome and maybe a little lighter to carry, especially while you're managing, again, all of the demands that treatment asks of you. Now, let me see. I'm going to open up some other questions that I've been getting. Give me a minute as I read through them. One of the questions here is there any coverage through insurance benefits for taking extended time off from work to deal with treatment? To my knowledge, there are not any insurance benefits that will pay for leave time off of work. However, depending on what state you live in, and if you are paying into, for example, in Massachusetts, there is paid family medical leave. In Massachusetts, you can apply for paid family medical leave for fertility treatments. That is a state program that if you're paying into it, you are entitled to use. That is something that you can look into if you're looking to get some time off of work to go to appointments or just to give yourself kind of less to think about and worry about as you're in active treatment. So in Massachusetts, that's PFMLA. In other states like New Hampshire or Maine or Rhode Island, I don't necessarily know what those states allow for, but you can certainly ask your HR. The next question is, what can I do if fertility challenges are impacting my self-esteem or sense of identity? That is a great question that definitely comes up. And this is a big question to unpack right here. What I would suggest is that you could sort of seek out your own individual therapy and support to learn more about what is your self-esteem looking like now and what did it look like before this process. Same with sense of identity. I think it is really common for fertility challenges to impact self-esteem. Oftentimes what a lot of patients report is feeling of blame or struggling with feelings of worthlessness. And so that is all really common. But again, I think with the support of a therapist, sometimes unpacking that can be really beneficial. And so there is not really like a quick fix. But just knowing that what you are experiencing is really common. How to address generational stress. I have always fought with anxiety during IVF cycle. I struggle with insomnia. Is melatonin a solution? I think melatonin is relatively safe to take and it could be a solution, but again, maybe something to talk to your doctor about. If you're finding that stress is really impacting kind of basic needs like sleep and appetite and functioning, that may necessitate a bigger conversation with your doctor about potentially medication that might be more impactful than just melatonin alone. Talk therapy is also suggested and recommended, but moving your body too can also be really helpful to move around some of that stored anxiety or trauma. And so taking a brisk walk when you're coming home from work, or maybe doing some meditation or journaling before bed can potentially help maybe offload some of that that's causing the insomnia. How do I balance staying hopeful while protecting myself emotionally? I do get this question a lot. I think generally what I recommend is allowing space for both. I think that while you are in IVF treatments, there is hope that is kind of seen in even those small physical acts that you're doing. So taking the call from the nursing team, meeting with your doctor, going to monitoring appointments and taking medications, like those are small acts of hope that keep you moving forward in this process. Protecting yourself emotionally, I think that patients can certainly try, and oftentimes wanting to protect yourself from feeling disappointed does not always work. I think that obviously IVF, there is just this inherent emotional investment. And so it is okay to feel that. It is okay to feel disappointed. It is okay to feel heartbroken. And it is also okay to feel hopeful and optimistic. And sometimes you feel all of those things in the same hour, let alone in the same day or the same week. I think you balance it by allowing yourself to feel both and not trying to skew yourself too far from one side or the other. When should I seek professional mental health support during fertility treatment? I think seeking professional mental health support is good at any point. You can do it preemptively. If you're starting fertility treatment, you can do it while you're in the middle of fertility treatment. I don't think that seeking mental health support ever has any downside or negative effects. You know, you could always meet with a mental health counselor, a mental health worker in the beginning, see how you feel, see if you need it, and continue to go through, you know, for maintenance as you're going through fertility treatment. It's really hard to know of all the things that are going to come up during treatment because IVF can be so unpredictable. And so if you're open to therapy or if you're open to just setting some foundational support from the beginning, that's a great idea. But if you're asking if you should, that probably means that you're curious to learn more about it, or at least willing to see if it's helpful. And so I wouldn't wait. I would look for some extra support now. What is the best way to handle well-meaning but insensitive comments from family and friends? Yes, this always comes up. First and foremost, I always say that you're going to have to practice setting some boundaries, which is definitely easier said than done, but also a necessity in this process. Setting boundaries are for you. So I think the first place that you start is deciding on what do you want or what do you need? What feels the most comfortable to you? And so part of that is also identifying triggers that can be helpful when deciding on what boundaries to set. If it's really triggering to get asked questions about your timeline and if you're pregnant or when you're transferring, or if it's really upsetting getting baby announcements in a public forum or getting unsolicited advice, set boundaries around those things. For insensitive comments from family and friends, I think it's okay to even call it out. And you could say something like, I know your intentions are good, and I know that you're just trying to help, but comments like that aren't helpful to me. I think a lot of family and friends do want to be helpful. I think a lot of family and friends do have good intentions and want to feel like they're saying the right thing and they're helping. Oftentimes, though, it's not helpful, and they also need to know that. What you can sometimes do is that you can guide them and let them know what good support feels like to you. So if you don't want unsolicited advice, you can say, thank you for trying to help, but I'm going to rely on my medical team for medical advice. Other insensitive comments, I think, just need to be kind of called out so that people are aware that they're insensitive, that they're upsetting, and then give them something to replace it with. Right? Instead of asking me about my IVF treatments, why don't you ask me about how my day is going or how work is going? You know, you can sort of help redirect them to understand what your boundary is. You also don't need to over-explain yourself or apologizing when setting a boundary or calling out an insensitive comment. It's possible to be direct and kind at the same time. How do I explain to others that just relaxing won't solve my fertility issues? I mean, I think that sounds pretty good right there, right? If someone says, just relax, it'll happen when you relax. I think it's fair to say that comment doesn't help me. It makes me feel like my feelings are invalid, or maybe it makes me feel like you're minimizing what my struggles are or what my fertility issues are. We know that people present to IVF for a lot of different reasons. Maybe it's unexplained infertility, maybe it's secondary infertility, maybe it's infertility due to a cancer history. There's lots and lots of different reasons why people come to seek treatment. And so to assume that it's because you're not relaxed enough is really invalidating to your experience. And I think that that's fair to say to someone directly and kindly. Oftentimes, when you tell someone to just relax, it really does the opposite. I think it's okay to even say that. This last holiday weekend was hard. What advice do you have for better preparing for upcoming holidays / family celebrations? This is a really good one. My colleague and I, Dylan, actually did a number of support groups around the holiday season because this is such a common worry or concern that patients have. And so I have a couple pieces of advice and recommendations. I think first off, it is okay to avoid triggering environments. And sometimes that is holidays spent with families or friends. If you can't avoid it completely, or if you don't want to, I think you can be strategic around how much time you're sharing with family and friends. Maybe you come right before appetizer and you leave right after dessert so that you're missing on that kind of downtime, maybe before or after. If you do decide to go and be with family and friends and celebrations and things, sometimes it's helpful to talk to your partner ahead of time to prepare responses to questions and comments that you think you might be getting. sometimes it's much more helpful to have an answer tucked away in your back pocket than having to think on your feet about how you want to respond to someone's question around, when are you having kids? Or are you having kids? Or how is your fertility treatments going? Coming up with some agreed upon language between you and your partner will just make it a tiny bit easier to answer some of those questions if it's something that's rehearsed, prepared, ready to go, and if you know it's the same thing that your partner is also sharing with folks. The other thing is that it can be really helpful to establish an escape plan with your support system, basically. If you're feeling overwhelmed at a holiday party or a family celebration and you need to go, but you want to be discreet about it, oftentimes I tell patients to have kind of a code word set up with their partner. Like, when I text you this word or when I say this word in conversation, that means it's go time. We're getting our jackets, we're saying goodbye, and we're leaving. You know, if you do decide to still be with family and friends for holiday celebrations, you know, it is okay to sort of limit your time and have some of these protective measures in place to make it more tolerable so that you can survive them. For folks that feel like maybe it would be too hard, it's also okay to say no. It's okay to decline an invitation. It's okay to skip out on one or two. You don't necessarily have to say yes to everything, especially when you are dealing with more. It is okay to do less. And again, I will mention another strong plug for boundaries. It can be really, really hard, especially with certain family members. Dynamics can be tricky, but again, boundaries are for you and your own protection. You do not have to disclose anything about your IVF treatments or your medical history if you simply don't want to. There are some things that are private and are not anyone else's business. And if you don't want to share that at the Thanksgiving table or at the Christmas table or at a Mother's Day celebration, you don't have to. But maybe having some prepared language to manage that is going to be helpful. So you can even write it down or put it in a notes app on your phone, or just practice saying it at home. Oh. What's your advice regarding coping with constant pregnancy announcements on social media? Yeah, that's a really hard one. I will say my first recommendation is always to potentially limit or to be really thoughtful about your social media usage. There's a lot on there, and we know a lot of people use social media as sort of like a highlight reel. We put our best stuff out on social media and hardly ever our worst. And so I think I would take what you see on social media with a grain of salt. But also recognizing that you have the ability to limit your exposure to that. I think if you're on Instagram or Facebook and you're seeing lots of different pregnancy announcements, I mean, you can also consider who they're coming from. If it's from someone that you used to be friends with in high school, but you're not actually friends now, you can mute them or temporarily block them or unfriend them, just so that you're not constantly exposing yourself to that kind of content. It might be hard to do something like that, you know, with people that you are actually close friends with or family and friends. And so, of course, you won't be able to eliminate that entirely. But I think if you do, you know, have a close group of friends or family and they seem to be kind of right in that phase too, where they're growing their families or you suspect a pregnancy announcement might come, something that can be really helpful is sort of pulling that person aside and saying, if you're going to announce, do you mind just letting me know by text first so I can better prepare, as opposed to learning at a friend dinner or learning at Thanksgiving? That would be harder for me. And I think most people can respect that. I don't think anyone is trying to make it harder by announcing pregnancy. But inevitably, sometimes it is really hard to see those announcements, and that's normal too. And so if you can limit your exposure on social media to only the people that you really, really want to engage with, and with those that are closest to you, try having that conversation about maybe what would feel more manageable if they are going to announce pregnancy. Text me ahead of time or give me the heads up. I don't really want to be taken off guard because I think that that's going to be really hard to manage. That's a really reasonable request. Balancing how to handle IVF and work. It has been difficult managing messaging at work with travel obligations, needing time off sporadically, etc. A tough one. It's a tough one. So what I will say is that when it comes to your employer, you are not obligated to share with them that you are doing fertility treatment. And there are legal protections in place to protect you from any discrimination or harassment. However, if you need time off of work or there needs to be changes made to your schedule or your responsibilities, then you may have to disclose to your employer that you are going through a pregnancy-related medical condition. You don't necessarily have to disclose that it's IVF, but you may have to disclose that it is a medical condition that you are addressing and managing, and that you do need time off of work to attend appointments, or that maybe you can't travel as much as you used to. Obviously, for yourselves, you know that that might be because you may be in cycle or you may need to go to doctor's appointments, but your employers don't necessarily need to know the specifics up front. Sometimes it can be really helpful to loop in your employer about what you're going through. You may be surprised in that they might have had some personal experience with IVF also, or there have been other employees who have too, and that they might have a system in place to help accommodate your schedule or help accommodate your work responsibilities. If you do have that family medical leave included in your kind of benefits, they also may be able to help you with that paperwork and accommodating your schedule. For folks that decide not to share with their employers at all, you know, it definitely gets a little trickier and you'll have to get a little more creative, especially if you do need time off or you do need to rearrange for travel. Your employer can't share your medical information with anyone. If you do eventually decide to disclose, that is all still HIPAA protected. And again, there are lots of laws and protections put in place to protect you from any discrimination or harassment. I have not shared my fertility struggles with many people. How can I address comments from family, friends, and coworkers like, is it your choice to not have children? And your younger sister is pregnant. What are you waiting for? Yeah. Well, I have a couple of thoughts. If you do not want to share your fertility struggles or your fertility journey with family, friends, or coworkers, that is your choice. Absolutely. How you handle questions like this, I think my recommendation is to keep it vague or simply say, I don't want to answer that, or that is none of your business, or how I want my family to look is up to me. I'll let you know once I decide. Things like your younger sister is pregnant, what are you waiting for? And is it your choice to not have children? I mean, those are very forward questions. And so I think you can have a very forward answer, like, that's private, or that isn't any of your business. Sometimes I like to secretly shame people and say, wow, what an interesting thing to say out loud. Oftentimes that makes people really reflect on what they've just said. I think you can also say things like, when I'm ready to share about my family building journey, I will. You can be direct and you can be kind. Is it your choice to not have children? I would say, whatever I decide when I'm ready to share, I'll let you know. You don't necessarily have to answer any questions that you don't want to or that you're not prepared to. How do I support my partner who is taking on the bulk of the physical aspects of our fertility treatment? I think the first thing is just recognizing that they are taking on the bulk of the physical aspects of the fertility treatment and recognizing that your experiences are going to be really different. And so maybe thinking of more creative ways to offset some other responsibilities. When you're in IVF treatment, the world is still turning. And so your bills still need to be paid and your home still needs to be taken care of and gifts still need to be purchased for parents and friends and nieces and nephews and things like that. And so finding other ways to maybe offset some of the other household or life tasks can be really helpful. If you want to take on doing the dishes or preparing what we're eating for dinner or cooking dinner or managing the grocery shopping, those are all really helpful ways just to take things off of your partner's to-do list that just inevitably gets longer and longer and longer when you're in fertility treatment. Or maybe even asking your partner, is there anything that I can do to help offset some of the work that you're doing? Things that can help sort of the physical aspects, maybe encouraging your partner to get a massage or do acupuncture or engage in kind of other self-care tasks may be helpful. The physical aspects are really difficult. The hormonal changes, the mood swings, and sometimes that's stuff that you can't really change. That is just kind of part of the process. I think the other thing I like to inform partners about is just your understanding of what your partner is going through. And so maybe sometimes that's kind of increasing your own patience, or finding ways to make them feel special, taking them out to dinner, doing a date night, offering to rub their feet, offering to watch their favorite show, even if it's not yours. I think those are kind of small things to do to show that you're being supportive and also that you want to help in any way that you can. Are there any books, apps, podcasts you recommend for emotional support during fertility treatment? Yes, there are tons. I have a list here that I was getting ready to share with you all because I was hoping this question would come up. So there's many, many books for managing IVF journey. One of my favorites is the Trying Game. It's called The Trying Game. Get through fertility treatment and get pregnant without losing your mind. That is by Amy Klein. Another one is IVF, a detailed guide. Everything I wish I had known before starting my fertility treatments by Bianca Smith. The other one is My Fertility Book, all the fertility and infertility explanations you will ever need from A to Z. And that is by Sheila Lamb. Those are some great books to get started on. And of course, we can certainly send out more in like an email list if that's helpful. Some podcasts to listen to, I will pull those up momentarily. Let me just pull them up here and we can share them with you. There is Infertility AF, hosted by Allison Prato, Prato. There is Fertility Docs Uncensored, and that is where this is a podcast where they have different fertility doctors come on and they are interviewed about different questions And so sometimes I think this can maybe be a better alternative than Dr. Google. Although something to remember about this Fertility Docs Uncensored is that they are giving general advice. These are reproductive endocrinologists that are giving general advice, and these are not doctors that are specific with your own care. But sometimes it can be helpful to hear other medical professionals give their thoughts and suggestions about fertility-related issues. Another one that is really popular is This is Infertility. This is actually hosted by Progyny, which provides some infertility insurance coverage. They're a very kind of comprehensive program. So This is Infertility. And then another one can be Infertility Feelings. This is hosted by Jesse and Doug. They have an organization called Uniquely Knitted. This is a couple that has gone through their own infertility, and they talk about a lot of different topics, how infertility impacted their marriage, the different pathways that they explored while looking into parenthood, which included donor eggs, adoption. So sometimes it can also be really helpful to hear from other people, again, who have actually gone through it. So those are my recommendations for now. But there's many, many, many that exist out there. Even if you go into Spotify and you just type even a specific category like infertility and stress, you will see lots of different episodes that arise. Another question here is, what if I feel resentful towards friends who got pregnant easily? What if you feel resentful? It is a really normal reaction. It is very normal to feel resentful or jealous around or towards someone who has something or was able to do something that you also want or wanted to be able to do, but couldn't. I think oftentimes people really fear labeling jealousy as something that they're experiencing because it has like such a negative connotation to be jealous or resentful. But those are really, really common reactions when there are other people who are able to get pregnant easily or at home or for free or on accident, people who are not even trying. That is really, really common to feel jealous because it's also something that you want for yourself, but is proving to be more difficult, or the pathway is proving to be different than what maybe other friends have gone through. I think instead of, trying to shame yourself or convince yourself that you're not jealous, I think the better, healthier thing to do is just allow yourself to feel what you're feeling. Being jealous and being resentful are really, really common in this world. And sometimes that's hard to say to other friends who don't get the struggles of IVF and infertility. And that's why it's hard to find your support network. Or that's not why it's hard, but that's why it's important to find your own support network. It's so important to find other people that are like, oh yeah, I remember when my best friend from college said she was pregnant and I was jealous as can be, or it made me angry, or it made me really sad. It's okay to find people, and you will find people that share these really unique feelings that IVF brings up. Jealousy is not bad. You're not saying that you don't want that friend to not get pregnant, that you only want it for yourself. It's that you want the same thing that they have, and you're unsure of if or when that's going to happen for you. Jealousy is part of the program, and it can also be something really helpful to talk to a therapist about, or other people that also know what it feels like to be jealous in this process. How can I better advocate for myself during treatment? It's a great question. I think it's really important. Advocacy can come in a lot of different forms. I think it's helpful to be really prepared in your appointments with your medical team and your doctor. And so writing down questions ahead of time so that you have them all there in a list ready to fire off when you have them in front of you or on the phone can be helpful. I think it also sort of depends on what you're advocating for. You know, there are some things that can be done and can be different. There are some things that there is not a whole lot of room to change. But speaking up, talking to your doctor, and asking them, are there different approaches we can take? What if we tried this? What do you think about that? I think asking questions is a great way to advocate for yourself while also knowing that, you know, there may be things that can be changed or done differently, and also recognizing that maybe some things cannot be changed or done differently. What maybe is also helpful to know is that we actually do have a patient advocate on site here at Boston IVF, and they can be a really great resource too if you're feeling like you just need some more guidance during treatment. What are some coping strategies during the 2-week wait? Yes, I know, the 2-week wait. I hear about this a lot. First, I think it's important to not try to set the goal of not feeling anxious at all, right? That is unfair to do to yourself. It is going to be a little anxiety provoking. Of course, you're feeling anxious, you want to know what the result is. I think what I would suggest often for folks is to not take a pregnancy test at home. Sometimes that can give you a false read and can be a little more emotionally complicated. So I would wait for your actual beta. In that 2-week time frame, I would just plan things that feel like make the time go faster. I would plan exciting things to look forward to, things that you've been wanting to try, a new restaurant, a new show, taking a walk at a new park, something, anything. Distraction can be really, really helpful. And so if you create fun plans during the week where it's a welcome distraction and it makes the time go quicker, that is the best thing I can recommend. I would stay off of Google. I would stay off of Reddit. Reddit is not your friend, and oftentimes does not actually make anyone feel any better. So don't try to kind of find your own medical advice on your own, right? You have a doctor for a reason. You have a medical team for a reason. They can help answer any questions. But while you're waiting, just try to make that waiting period as fun as possible. Distraction is your friend. What are the best encouraging words or quotes for any family and friends that are currently undergoing treatment? This is really thoughtful. I mean, I think just letting them know that you are available to kind of listen without giving advice, or listen without offering any platitudes that maybe feel a little empty or feel a little forced or missing the mark. I think what most fertility patients want is to feel heard and to feel seen without trying to have their experiences feel minimized. At least this, or at least that, or look on the bright side. You know, there doesn't necessarily have to be a silver lining, and it's not up to us to kind of bring that to our friends' attention if they're going through treatment, right? I think the best thing that you can do is say, like, I am here. What does support look like to you? Like, is it me calling you and asking for updates, or is it me calling you and not talking about it? Do you want me to bring it up, or do you want me to wait for you to bring it up? Do you want me to share with our friends so that they know, or do you want me to not share this with anyone? I think it's okay to ask, like, what does good support look like for you? Do you want to plan like a walking date every week? Do you want to plan a dinner every other week? Is it helpful for me to send you articles or information about infertility and treatments, or is it not? You know, everybody needs something different. Every fertility patient has their own version and flavor of what feels supportive. And if you're looking to just be supportive to your friend, ask them, what's your flavor? What's going to make you feel better supported throughout this? If you can relate to the IVF experience, I would kind of avoid giving your own anecdotal advice, or like, this is what my experience was like. Oftentimes for patients, it can be really hard to hear other stories of what other people did in their fertility treatments and if it was successful or not. they really just want to focus on their own experience because it's what they're going through. So it's okay to ask, what do you need? How can I be supportive? And respect what they tell you. They are the experts in what they need. So in that regard, listen to the expert. Someone said, how can we find the patient advocate? Where at Boston IVF? So the patient advocate is here in-house. Oftentimes you can just ask your team to speak with Christy Simone is her name. Or if you call the Boston IVF main number, you can be connected to her. She is here for an extra layer of support and has been wonderful in working with other patients in the past. Okay. I think that is it for our time here together. We are just about 3 minutes shy of 1 p.m. Are there any other last minute thoughts, questions, concerns, things that would be helpful to talk about? Okay. All right. I think we have one more question. What kind of therapy do you recommend besides cognitive behavioral therapy? I think psychotherapy, traditional talk therapy can be really helpful. In a lot of ways, undergoing IVF treatment can be traumatic. What we know is that trauma often brings up trauma. And so what comes up during your IVF treatments is not always necessarily related to just IVF, but potentially other triggers that have formed through past experiences in childhood or young adulthood. Understanding some of that can better help you understand why you're responding or reacting the way that you are to IVF treatment. So cognitive behavioral therapy and traditional psychotherapy would be my top 2 recommendations. All right. Thank you all for joining. It was such a pleasure to be here with you all. As a reminder, if you are Boston IVF patients, myself and Dylan Everett are available for ongoing individual or couples counseling. We also host the monthly support groups. These are all things that are offered through the Wellness Center. You can get information on the support groups on the Boston IVF website. The number to the Wellness Center is 781-434-6578. We are here. Please let us know how we can be helpful. And thank you again.